The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL. You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
Quinshon Judkins was arrested in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for battery and domestic violence charges. We know the basics of this situation at this time. CBS News had some extra, in Miami, had some extra insight that was kind of shared on Sunday as this played out over the weekend, of course. And basically, he was arrested and charged with misdemeanor domestic battery Saturday, appeared in a bond court on Sunday. Judge found probable cause and ordered Judkins to be to not be in contact, with the victim. No firearm access, and set the bond at $2,500. The incident happened on July 7th and was reported 5 days later. This is where things get a little bit interesting. Judkins and the victim were previously in a relationship, according to court documents obtained by CBS News in Miami, but they came to South Florida together as what they quoted as friends, and documents indicate that after celebrating her birthday, this friend of Quinshon Judkins reported the incident several days later, as I said, 5 days later, on the 12th, the day that he was arrested. So this story already has some weird parts and pieces to it, which is why, of course, we preface all this with the need to let the legal process play out. And that's what the Browns are going to say and do as well. We've already had the blanket statement from team representatives where they say, they're gathering more information and they'll go from there. The NFL has said the same thing. And that's frankly what this Browns team does anyway. And that's the thing. Like, we do have precedent for how the Browns handle these things as recently as last year with another second round pick of this franchise and Mike Hall Jr., who was charged with the same exact thing and wound up serving a 5-game suspension for it. And he spent some time in the commissioner's exempt list and had to miss an extra game, and then was, back in the field after 5 games. And so we don't know yet, how this situation unfolded, what the full details are, what's going to happen in a court of law, what's going to happen, with the NFL and what type of punishment they could potentially hand out. All those things are yet to be determined. So we'll let that all sort of happen before we really rush to any judgments here. But obviously, there's a couple different layers to what makes this interesting and also disappointing, obviously, to a degree. And first and foremost, I think what's interesting is Judkins is the one rookie on this team that hasn't signed his deal yet. And there's been conversations that he's apparently trying to get his contract fully guaranteed as a second round pick. And so I don't know what type of wrinkle gets thrown into those negotiations, those conversations, with this news now percolating and popping up on the radar, and this being something that he's caught up in. But again, legal process has to play out before anything really happens, so we'll see. But still, what I find so I don't know if it's ironic, but it's just crazy that with this franchise, you just never know. I mean, we are just a couple weeks removed from what felt like the big bad scandal of the offseason for the Browns was going to be 2 speeding tickets for Shedeur Sanders. What are we ever going to do? It's like the sky seemed to be falling over that, which was a little ridiculous, obviously, at the time. And I downplayed it and said it shouldn't be something that we make that big of a deal out of. I thought it was going to be smooth sailing the rest of the way to training camp, but this is why you just never know in the NFL. You just never know what's going to happen. And you certainly never know with this team. And so for the second consecutive offseason now, I guess technically the Mike Hall Jr. situation played out more so when training camp had already started, but it's still one of these things where, like, summer months, if you think you're like, this is what you hope for as a fan of any team, whether it's the Browns or otherwise. You just hope that your team gets through this time of year, June, July, into training camp without any incidents. You just hope and pray that your team doesn't pop up on the radar in terms of, having any legal issues or anybody getting in trouble and arrested that you have to talk about, because that's the only story that really percolates this time of year. That's the only thing that ever seems to come out of this time of year in the NFL news cycle is guys getting in trouble. And you just hope it doesn't happen to your team. And here we are for the second consecutive year with it happening to the Browns in a big way during the summer months. It's crazy. You can't script it. You can't make it up. It's just never a dull moment with this franchise, as I said at the top of the show. But that said, we don't know the full details. I think what's before we get all those details and all that, I think obviously disappointment was felt this weekend from the fan base, understandably so. But I think what's also just shocking and surprising, and I know the easy thing to do for everyone is rush to call out Andrew Berry and be like, man, he really picks standout guys. But I think the problem with that is, man, like Quinshon Judkins, by all accounts, has been raved about as a stand-up guy, whether it was his time at Ohio State, his time at Ole Miss. Nobody had anything bad to say about him. He never had any legal troubles before this. And so I don't know that you could have predicted this was going to happen. And this wasn't one of those instances where Barry was taking a gamble on a guy and trying to, revive or, like bank on the talent over some of the off the field issues. Like that was never part of Quinshon Judkins' story during the pre-draft process, leading into the start of his NFL career here, him getting drafted by the Browns. There was no character concerns. And so that is what I think is the most surprising from all this, is that it happened to somebody who has been resoundingly respected and spoken highly of throughout this process. But anybody, I guess, these things can happen to anybody. You never fully get, know what's going on, especially when somebody's off in the off season doing their own thing. And again, we still have to let the legal process play out, see how what all transpires from here. But obviously there's bigger ramifications if this leads to a suspension for Quinshon Judkins as the guy that's supposed to be the lead back of this group and, be this workhorse running back. If he misses time, that changes the math a little bit on things. And I guess you take some solace in the fact that if that is what happens, Browns did draft 2 running backs. They got Dylan Sampson there. They still have Jerome Ford, who certainly is a proven commodity in this backfield and has done some nice things throughout his career. So you still have some guys in that room that you can lean on, but it does change things a little bit because Quinshon came in with a lot of, there was a lot of bluster and excitement about him being the start of this new era at the running back position here in Cleveland. And it might end up getting delayed here in terms of getting to see the start of it based on how this legal situation plays itself out. But like the Browns will say, I will let the legal process play out before we cast any judgment, before you make any deeper assumptions or predictions on things. But I will say that if there is a suspension, my prediction of him being a Pro Bowler and how many yards did I say? I think I said at least 1,000. I think I said over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. It certainly will be in jeopardy if we get to that point.
Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drink, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
The NFL's second-round pick problem could lead to a little bit of a mini holdout between the Saints and second-round pick Tyler Shough.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast.
The NFL has a major second round pick problem that it's got to get figured out ideally before training camp, but that has already not been the case. But also at least ahead of a couple of weeks into training camp, you want to get this solved as soon as possible. And it could very well turn into a little bit of an event for the New Orleans Saints and second round pick and potential starting quarterback, Tyler Shough. So we're going to discuss what the second round pick problem is, why it has a ripple effect on the New Orleans Saints, and ultimately why you shouldn't be concerned. And I want to start there because I want this to be very clear. We've broken this down on the show before, but I thought it would be a good idea to come back to it now that we're, a week and a day ahead of the Saints reporting for training camp. Yay, yippee. Like, I'm so excited for football to be back. But I wanted to come back to this, make sure that if you're tuning in for the first time or if you've forgotten the details of this and the nuance of this, that we did a little bit of a refresher on it. But this is not a panic situation. This is not an issue that arises from some malcontent somewhere. This is not an issue that arises from some selfishness somewhere or maliciousness anywhere. This is all about standard precedent in a changing landscape of contract negotiation. That is all that this is about. This is a second round pick situation, not a Tyler Shough situation. So that's the thing to keep in mind throughout all of this, right? As we're discussing this, remember Tyler Shough's not the one that sits in Mickey Loomis and Kai Harley's conference room and negotiates the contract. He is not having those conversations. So this is not about Tyler Shough. This is not a situation in which Tyler Shough or his team are wanting something unreasonable and therefore a contract does not come to an agreement with. And under every circumstance, if you don't have a signed contract by the time that training camp starts, you should not take the football field, because if you get injured, you've got nothing protecting you. It's not the same thing as OTAs and mandatory minicamp when you have a participation agreement and all those other pieces. This is different. You want to have a contract before you go out there and risk injury. So these are all things to keep in mind. This is not a situation where Tyler Shough's being selfish and he's being unreasonable. No. It's none of that junk. This is something else that's much bigger than any one player and much bigger than any one player's team of negotiators. And it's much bigger than any one NFL team. What's going on right now is a major shift in the landscape for previously negotiated contracts that have been on the NFL's collective bargaining agreement since like 2011-ish. And so what this really comes down to is that two players, really most notably one, Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver of the Houston Texans, who was drafted with the second selection of the second round, the 34th overall selection. He became the first player in NFL history to ever get a fully guaranteed second round contract. It had never happened before because he is pick number 34 and the second pick of the second round. That meant that the first pick of the second round was also going to get a fully guaranteed second round pick. That was Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker of UCLA with the Cleveland Browns. So that was automatic, right? Once pick 34 got that, pick 33 was going to get that. So that was done. Now what's happening is that everybody from pick 35 on through pick 64 are trying to figure out where they fall in all of this. At what point does a team or does a player no longer, or a player's representation, no longer get that fully guaranteed second round contract? And with Tyler Shough being the 40th overall selection, the 8th pick in that second round, there's no rush for Tyler Shough's people to say, yeah, we'll take less than a fully guaranteed contract, because picks 35 through 39 have not yet accepted anything less than a fully guaranteed second round contract because they haven't agreed to a contract yet, because they got to get all this figured out. So 39 is waiting on 38, 38 is waiting on 37, 37 is waiting on 36, 36 is waiting on 35. Because if you are the team that gives a fully guaranteed contract to pick number 40, then you have just negotiated a fully guaranteed second round contract for picks 35 through 39 if those haven't been signed yet. If pick 35 does not get a fully guaranteed second round contract and instead gets 95% or 90% of it guaranteed, then you'll start to see the numbers kind of trickle down from there. And so you need to kind of wait and see how this all pans out. And so now what is happening is that players without a signed second round contract, this is a completely understandable thing, have already begun to not appear and not report for training camp on their reporting date. The first player to do this was former Ole Miss, now current Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver Trey Harris. Trey Harris, who was like towards the bottom part of the second round, he does not have a second round contract signed yet, and therefore did not report for training camp. An understandable decision, because if you go out there and you play not on a contract, you have no guarantees and all these other things, and you get injured, you're in trouble, right? Or could end up in trouble. If you are somebody that's at the bottom of the second round, you're not signing a fully guaranteed deal or anything less than a fully guaranteed deal until somebody else does, right? So you're waiting to see how everything goes. So here's what I would expect. At some point, somewhere in the second round, someone is not going to get a 100% guaranteed contract. They might get a 98% guaranteed contract or a 95% guaranteed contract. They will get something above what their predecessor second round pick in that position got. So for instance, the New Orleans Saints selected Tyler Shough in the second round at pick 40 overall. Okay. So now we're getting into this is how this affects the Saints. So last year's 40th overall selection was Cooper DeJean, the defensive back with the Philadelphia Eagles. He got 80.46. We'll just call it 80.5 for the sake of our conversation. Although for anybody that's in this negotiating room, you're rocking with 80.46. Like you're rocking with the most precise number possible. But 80.5, 80.5% of that contract was guaranteed. Now, remember when we're talking about this contract, by the way, we're talking about a total 4-year, $9.3-ish million, $9.283 million is what it is, 28.3 if anybody wanted it. And so we're not talking about a lot of money here. When you think about that over the course of 4 years, right? We're not talking about, $100 million guaranteed here or anything like that. We're talking about less than $10 million guaranteed if Tyler Shough were to get the 100% guaranteed deal. So not an issue for the Saints if that happens. Like there's no bad money moves here. You just probably don't want to be the team to negotiate ahead of the precedent that's being set. And that's all that this is about. This is all about new precedent, new territory entirely for the NFL. So if you hear on the 22nd that Tyler Shough has not reported for training camp, do not worry. It is not bad blood between Tyler Shough and the Saints. The fact of the matter is that players get the opportunity to organize, which they need to do in this situation, and teams don't, right? They don't get the opportunity to collude. They just got in trouble for collusion. So they're not going to go that route. And so the players might, in solidarity, say, until we all figure out how this is happening, none of us are appearing. And that is a logical thing to do from a workers' union standpoint, right? Just from a bare minimum workers' union standpoint. And all of these guys are unionized, NFLPA, so on and so forth. So do not be surprised if that happens, but do not panic if it does happen either, right? Like hopefully they'll get this all taken care of. They got another week. We'll see how things begin to progress. The Saints are not far down the line here. 35 through 39 might have to go first before they make a decision at 40, but we'll see where things go.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Look, they're saving you money already.
Unfortunately, Chargers second-round pick Trey Harris was not there to report with the rest of the rookies at Chargers training camp because he is officially holding out.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers.
Daniel, we have a holdout. Trey Harris is not going to be at camp until the contract situation is going to get done. How is that going to affect his wide receiver battle and more? We're going to get into all of the offensive camp battles here. Amarian Hampton versus Najee Harris, Zion versus Bozeman. Lots of intriguing matchups, and we're going to get into all of them.
Yeah, and today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. But training camp battles can mean many things. Battling for a spot, battling for a starting spot, battling for snaps, but you have to be on the field to be able to battle for it. And that's where we start here, David, because the rookies reported already over the weekend, and Trey Harris is officially holding out. And this is a really weird situation, unlike one I've ever seen, because now 30 of the 32 second-round picks of the 2025 NFL Draft are at this point and remain unsigned. Now, the reason Trey Harris is special is because the Chargers got to start training camp 10 days early, meaning none of the other guys are really up against it the way that Trey Harris is. And when you're trying to decide how these contracts are going to play out and who gets what guaranteed money, you're usually going by who is slotted next to you or the position player that's at the same position drafted ahead of you or right behind you. Really hard to do in Trey Harris's case because he's in the 50s, and right now only the 33rd overall pick Carson Schwessinger and the 34th overall pick Jaden Higgins are both signed, and both of those contracts are fully guaranteed. And that's where a lot of the nitty-gritty of this is happening, and where the holdout and Trey Harris not being there has come down to, because of course you want as much guaranteed money as you possibly can. There's only so much that can really be bargained with in draft picks, but reportedly, the Texans kind of threw a wrench into things when they fully guaranteed Jaden Higgins' contract, and now it's kind of at a standstill. I think at one point somebody will sign and a domino effect will start, but man, it really sucks to not have Trey Harris out there at the beginning of training camp, and we'll see how long it goes.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the last year, going into that playoff game, and obviously, the result of that was very, very clear that the Chargers needed to add more guys that can get open on a consistent basis, guys that can really do damage against man and zone coverage. And Trey Harris can absolutely do that. He had the skill set. He showed that in college. And yeah, I think a lot of people were very excited about what he's able to bring to the Chargers offense, a much needed element. But that's not going to happen because he's unsigned. And so the more time that he misses where he's not on the football field, it lessens his chances to be able to find that chemistry with his quarterback and be able to build that trust and to be able to supersede some of the guys that are ahead of him on the depth chart.
Yeah, and the thing is like, I hate seeing him get bashed, right? I mean, it feels like a lot of Chargers fans have already turned on Trey Harris because of this, when this really isn't just a Trey Harris problem. I mean, you could go back and forth on whether, NFL contracts should be fully guaranteed or not. But at the end of the day, these agents are the ones working these deals out. And when you have a situation like this where one guy signing, especially someone like Trey Harris, can have a domino effect throughout the rest of the draft class, or at least the second round picks, it really complicates things a little bit. I don't take this as Trey Harris being a diva and that being a problem. We have to see how long it actually lasts before I think we realize the full impact of it. But I just don't agree with, the bashing he's taken on social media. I think that's uncalled for. But we're also talking about an owner in the Chargers, if you're trying to get guaranteed money, that basically just got caught red-handed thanking the Cardinals owner for helping him pay Justin Herbert less. So this isn't something I think that gets resolved overnight, unfortunately, but it doesn't change the fact that on the field, this is going to have an impact. And as we start talking about these training camp battles today, David, it's hard not to think that this is going to affect his battle, a guy where, we saw Ladd McConkey last year go into training camp as, probably a starter, right? I mean, there wasn't a ton of competition there, but he solidified being basically the number one wide receiver during this time of the offseason. Trey Harris theoretically could have done that even with more competition this time around. And it's hard to imagine that this doesn't impact that at all.
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, like the offseason workouts, the offseason programs are great. Like, it's good to be in the building, good to show face, good to get in the facility and use all the equipment. That's all fantastic. Get FaceTime with the coaches. But this is where the real football is played. Like, this is where things get ratcheted up. You put the pads on. You actually go in and you're trying to install the stuff that you put in, in the classroom. You're trying to put that into practice on the field and drill it to where you have it and you're confident going into the season that you know how to execute it. All of that happens right now in training camp. Like, this is where you lay the foundation. This is where you go take all those snaps that you want to have and assert yourself and try, to be undeniable and where they need to slot you. And right now, you're not giving yourself an opportunity to do that when you're not on the football field. So, and we've seen it before. Like, Joey Bosa held out, and what happened? He got hurt, and he missed a large portion of the season. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the more time that you're not on the football field, the less time you have to be able to understand and implement everything that you were supposed to learn in the offseason. So this is very, very valuable time that's being missed, Daniel.
And let's be clear, as of right now, like it's not hugely impactful. Justin Herbert's not out there yet. That chemistry can't be even, made at this point. But the problem is there's a preseason game in a little over 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
How long is this going to go? And then not knowing of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit with the Najee Harris, right, fireworks incident, where it's like, how long is he going to be out? How long is Trey Harris going to remain unsigned? Because that's the only way you can kind of get the full impact or the full kind of view of what this is going to do. And it just feels like he's going into training camp as probably wide receiver 4 behind Mike Williams and Quinton Johnston and Ladd McConkey. And it just makes it a little bit tougher to go catch up to those guys if you're missing time. And also, if you're the Chargers, this is basically the biggest investment that you made into a pass catcher this offseason, was bringing in Trey Harris in the second round. And it feels like even if he gets off to a slower start, even if he can't kind of make up the ground on those guys, that is going to have an impact on your season offensively, which is, I think, why this is so important. But in the rest of the wide receiver room, there is more battles that are going to be continue to go on, and other guys who are going to be able to have a chance to raise their stock while Trey Harris is out potentially, like Mike Williams, right? Quinton Johnston, those guys kind of squaring off to see where they end up in the pecking order of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. What can Keandre Lambert-Smith do? And, can one of these guys like a Jalen Reagor or a Brendan Rice at the bottom of the roster try to get a spot or make them keep a 7th wide receiver? So while Trey Harris is out, David, the fireworks in the wide receiver room, maybe we should find a different term for that now. The battles in the wide receiver room don't stop.
No, they don't. And I mean, I think if I'm any one of these other guys, it's like, okay, opportunities are knocking, right? That means that I get my chance and I get to go out there and shine, and I get to be able to go take a job, right? If I'm a Brendan Rice, if I'm a Jalen Reagor, who I think are probably right now pretty close to being on the outside looking in, this is valuable opportunities right here to be able to go take every single chance you can to make this roster.
Absolutely. And I think, again, for these battles in here, the biggest questions will be, can Quinton Johnston take another step? Because if he wants to kind of cement himself as the wide receiver 2, we know he has to have another big leap this year.
Yeah.
And then I think for Mike Williams, it's staying healthy, already missed time during the offseason. If you're not out there, you're not going to be able to kind of get back on the same page with Justin Herbert. You're not going to be able to show this team that, hey, I can pick up where I left off on the outside, stick me out there at X, put Ladd McConkey in the slot, and everybody eats, right? You have to be able to go out there and show that. And I don't know if they're going to want him to play a ton in the preseason with his injury history. I wouldn't necessarily think so.
I doubt it.
So can he get out there in training camp, show that he's healthy, show that he's fully recovered from the knee injury in 2023, and now he's getting more physically back to where he was before that, when he was putting together a dominant season that got cut tragically short. But there are a lot of things to watch for in this wide receiver room, and also the Keandre Lambert-Smith of it all. Can he make up some ground on Trey Harris now? Will he be back? Jim Harbaugh said he expected all the guys that missed OTAs that would be back for training camp. How can he factor into this, potentially getting some of the snaps that another rookie would have gotten?